All right, I think we got it all squared away. Welcome everyone to Accuracy in America. I'm Don Irvine, joined by Brian McNicoll, who is back home.
That's right. Back from my little journey. Hello, deplorables, drags, despicables, chumps, and dog-faced pony soldiers.
All right. Okay. Before we get on to all the news, I just wanted to say, so, Brian, at least you had a chance, to enjoy Thanksgiving with some family, extended family, which is not the case with a lot of people. How did that go? Plus you had the trip that you said you stopped along the way.
Yeah. So I saw a lot of different cousins and so forth, and we had about, I guess we had two families, like my niece and her husband. Both of our families were at the Thanksgiving dinner. We kind of like, his people sat at one table and our people sat at another to, prevent transmission or whatever. But we all visited and had fun. They're very good people, and it was, that was enjoyable. The food, of course, was unbelievably good, as well worth the drive and so forth. So.
I was gonna say, I mean, it's like, what's the relatives' reactions? Like you've already kind of gone through COVID. They feel safer with you.
Well, I mean, I got asked. My sister asked me, have y'all been? Do you know you don't have it, basically? And I said, yeah, we know. And also, like, we're doing the basketball stuff, so I get my temperature taken 3 or 4 times a week. At twice when I go to TJ for their practices, and then twice on the weekends when we play in these little tournaments. So, it's getting looked at a lot, and I don't feel any symptoms, and so, but they did ask, and there's some older people there, and the people with some other health concerns that they wouldn't want to be exposed, and I'm all for that.
Yeah. I think taking caution is always a good thing, particularly right now. All right, we've also got, it's hard to believe, I mean, it's December. It's 23 days until Christmas. I kind of woke up this morning like, I don't know. The way the holidays are going, I'm not quite sure I feel one to the other necessarily, but hopefully get a little bit more in the Christmas spirit as we move forward.
Yeah, and I'm starting to see, I think it's going to be an early year for people getting stuff up. I've seen a lot of, like, my friends on Facebook and so forth. There's our Christmas tree already up and our whole house decked out and everything. I think people are really looking forward to like a festive occasion. This will be, for me, it'll be kind of a strange. I've lived here since 1988, and I've gone home for Christmas every year, and until this year. That's why we went Thanksgiving, because we can't go Christmas.
Okay. Yeah. I think you're right about
what's going on that is the Fairfax County is supposed to say either today or either tomorrow or the next day for sure whether there's going to be winter sports. There's a few jurisdictions in Virginia, city of Alexandria and Rico County that have said no winter sports. And so, we're waiting to see what they do. Optimistic, but there's a lot going on. So
yeah,
we'll see. So that decision should be out this week.
Yeah, since you mentioned this, I'm going to elevate something that was at the bottom of the list to the top, because I think we might as well go ahead and talk about kind of the COVID issues. Is there going to be a post Thanksgiving, kind of surge? I mean, we've already seen a lot of cases before Thanksgiving, a lot of upside down, kind of things like this. But I also want to ask you, in regard to this, with the New York City public school system, I mean, they had a 3% threshold, but that 3%, the thing about it that always got me was that this was about the general population. This was not about the schools itself. I mean, the schools itself have a very low rate, and they were saying, oh, well, when we get to this, we got to shut it down, though they seem to have reversed themselves. I mean, the kids are really suffering here.
Right. I mean, Fairfax County came out last week that, Fs are up 53%.
Wow.
Kids are flunking school. And I can tell you that my kids, because you get these progress reports from the teachers, right? And their problem is they're forgetting stuff. And that my kids generally do their work, and the idea that they're just, things are slipping their mind that are on their task list is kind of different. It kind of tells me that there's something going on here beyond, that's not normal, that this is partly responsible for it. I think there are it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Cases have gone up. There's all kind of information out there about hospitals. Some people say the hospitals are overloaded. Some of them say they're graveyards. There's nobody in there. So, I don't really know about that. You have to be careful about the numbers here. They'll say, ICUs are at 92% capacity. Okay. ICUs are kept at a point where they will be at 90% capacity. Otherwise, the hospital loses a lot of money, right? So the idea that ICUs are loaded, they're supposed to be loaded. That's how ICUs work. It's a very expensive part of the hospital. So I don't know about like the spread thing, it's like, Dr. Fauci has come out and said now that he doesn't think that schools should be closed. There's a study out yesterday that said athletics has not led to an increase in COVID. In fact, they seem to be safer for some reason. I guess you're pushing poison right out of your body. I know the high school, one of the things they were talking about, if we start next month, it's supposed to start next Monday, if winter sports are allowed to start. But there'll be some weird rules. Like one of them is your seat on the bench is your seat on the bench. So, I got 12 kids. I have to have 12 seats. And like when the 5 of us go out there, no one can sit in their seats. They sit in those seats the whole day. Those seats must remain unoccupied. And it's like, so they're going to let us, in theory, if this goes forward, play for 32 minutes, right? Of timed hard basketball. But there's no jump ball, because out of all the things that happen in basketball, jump ball was deemed to be, unacceptably dangerous. I don't really get that, but I mean, you can tell that people are sitting around in meetings and saying, what can we do about this? I don't know that we're going to have cheerleaders. They're going back and forth on the crowds. They said at first it was, there can only be 25 people in the gym. So that's counting the coaches, referees, players. Now it's all the team personnel plus 25 people, which I think is more reasonable. You have some parents who just can't bear to miss it. And God bless them for that, so it'll be interesting to see, how it unfolds and, how they adjust as, this, I mean, the only way out is through, right? And so we are getting out of this. It's not going as, it could go more smoothly or whatever, but, we have vaccines. I guess it became available in the UK today. You can get a vaccine in the UK today. It will be available here in the next couple of weeks. And so, how will that change? How will it change that, you have about 80 million school children in Virginia and in the United States, and about 120 of them have died of COVID. And, how long do we, shut everything down for those kind of numbers? I mean, it's to the point where you can really see the harm being done to the kids, and the benefits are starting to fade.
Yeah, no, and you're right about this the statistic you quote on the Fs. This is not unusual. I mean, for what we're seeing, for what I've read in various publications about online learning, was that these kids are failing at a far higher rate. They're flunking a lot of classes. Part of it may be the retention. Other parts of it is a little bit disinterest. I mean, they're in a home. They're competing in a home situation. There's a lot of things going on. They're not they can't stay focused, and they're not in that classroom environment, which is extremely important, I think, for the kids, their development. Emotionally, intellectually, all of these things that they need to be there. And this distance learning thing, on a long-term basis, just does not cut it. And I'm kind of wondering, with Dr. Fauci, now that he has said this, what some of these more liberal school districts are going to do, because to me, it always seemed that, Fauci, for a lot of liberals particularly, say, well, what Dr. Fauci said, he says, we can't do this, or we can't do this, so we need to follow that. Now he's coming out and saying something that is very contrary to what a lot of these jurisdictions were doing. Will they now move down that model? I mean, the parents, for the most part, have been clamoring for this. The teachers have not necessarily been clamoring for this, but the parents have. And I've always felt, I understand teachers, a lot of them are older, maybe some health issues, but I think we've talked about this before, is that, if this is a situation, you may want to take early retirement to retire, or move to a desk job, or find another position within the school system. Let someone who's willing to come in there and teach, and get in the classroom and do it, because this is a crisis for America and the future generations. If we don't resolve this fairly quickly, we cannot go on this basis very long, because we're just losing so much learning ability here that'll affect us for a long time to come.
Yeah, I mean, my kids are 8th grade and 10th grade, but could you imagine like being 2nd grade and 4th grade? How do those guys, pay attention all day? Because the thing about this is, it's like if you're in a normal classroom, there's a few moments in the class when you can tune out. Some other student asks a question that you already know the answer to. The teacher is explaining the answer to the other student. Your brain can rest for a second, right? This is, you got to watch it every second. You got to stay on it every second. That's hard for kids to do. Because I hear my kids' classes, and they'll be like, what do you think, Marty? Marty's like, oh, what? So you just hope that he's watching, and it's like, and it's hard to stay like locked into that. So, I think that they need, I think if we can just say the presumption needs to be that in person is better than at home. And the presumption needs to be that as quickly as we can do this, we need to transition back into that. I don't think they're even operating under those assumptions yet, right? A lot of school systems are still saying, we'll stay home. The default's going to be stay home till further notice. I don't think that's viable in even the medium term anymore. These kids got to go to school. They got to get out of the house. One of the things about school is, a key element of school is it trains you that Monday through Friday during the daylight hours, you're going to be busy, right? You got to go somewhere, you got to do something, your performance will be measured and evaluated, and you'll be, rewarded accordingly. Okay. So that trains you to do what? Work, right? Hold a job, function in society, make a living, right? We're now telling people, get up, pull that computer over to your side of the bed, log on, punch the button that says you're present, because it's basically they're just punching a button. Like my son on Mondays, all he has to do is get up at 7:30 in the morning and punch a button that says that that he checked in. Okay. And they may talk to him for 5 minutes, and that's his day. Okay. My daughter has nothing on Monday because it's asynchronous learning day. Yeah. So you catch up on your homework, and you can talk to your teachers if you're behind on stuff or need help or whatever. Okay. Which is good. That's fine. But no teaching occurs on Monday in Fairfax County. I don't know how other people do it. So, we're down to 4 days a week, and it's diminished potential, like PE, they don't move. PE is just, they've done all the health units, but like, there's no moving. There's no, hey, we're going to go walk around the track today. Yeah. All the things that PE classes do. So, if we could just get the default, but, the way things are going, people are going to be gaining influence in this who want to keep it locked down, because they take advantage of the power that gives them. You can California, they're upping the ante. They're making it worse. New York, some guy tried to open his restaurant, and 40 cops went and put him in jail.
I do love that guy. He set up the autonomous zone. I give him credit for doing that. I mean, there's a guy in California too. I think it was, he poked fun at at Gavin Newsom and then the mayor of San Francisco, and kind of hung a sign from that thing over there, right? But he hung that French Laundry thing, and he's defying it too. I mean, the businesses are going to have to do this, but what you said, something that I think is really interesting, and I think is important too, because I don't think a lot of people really look at school in this way, but But these things about getting up in the morning, getting dressed and ready for school. I mean, we had, we did this with, I did this with my kids. You've done this with your kids, they have kind of a routine. They get up, they eat breakfast, maybe they take a shower, whatever they do, and they get all ready and they catch a bus or they walk to school or they get a ride or whatever the deal is. But they have this, and you say, they're kind of trained to be busy for 5, 6, 7 hours a day or whatever it is, most of the daylight hours, much like we, who used to work in physical offices would get up and we'd go through this preparation routine and we'd go to the office and we put in our time and then we come back home. That learning is actually kind of important. What you said about Marty is interesting too, because if for the kids, I mean, he's not the only one. I mean, the kids, if they zone out on a Zoom, call, and then all of a sudden, they're called. When you're in the classroom, it's kind of like being in a business meeting with your colleagues. You can read the room, right?
Right.
And so, if you want to hide, you can probably hide for a period of time. But if the teacher all of a sudden just decides, hey, Joe, whatever, Brian, Don, all this. You might know what you might suspect that you might be called on if you're in the physical room, but on a Zoom call, it's always kind of like, oh, I don't know what's happening next for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
But
very staccato way of communicating.
Yeah, but that concentration level, because I haven't talked to my daughter about this specifically, but her oldest child is 8 years old, right? I mean, we already know the attention span of these kids. They are in class, which is good. But he had some kid apparently wound up through, I don't know, contact tracing or whatever, and so he had to stay home for like 2 weeks or whatever, which was only going to drive my daughter.
That's one thing. CDC is going to fix that one thing, right? So they're saying if you think you came into contact, the quarantine period, they've lowered that from 14 to 7.
That'll help, but I mean, kids that are, 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, whatever, we already know their attention span is not, set to this concentration level. So the way there's the classroom chatter and all the other things, it's part of the process, of all the things. And the teachers know when they're in the room, they can kind of see the kids and they kind of figure out what they have to do next. They may have their lesson plan, but they also can adjust on the fly based on what the kids are doing that day, particularly. The Zoom, that interpersonal relationship is all gone, and it's really terrible. It's really too bad for the kids. I'm glad my kids are older and not into that whole thing anymore, except for the fact that my daughter is now going through it with her kids, and this is going to be a problem. With all of it.
There are going to be gaps in learning. It's a new phase of discipline. Somebody else tried to start something the other day, and it was a team. And they had like a team Zoom, and then the next note you got was, "We're sorry about what happened on the team Zoom." So I don't know what the kids did, but they shut down the team Zoom, right? So. I mean, those things are exploitable, right? When they first started in Fairfax County, anybody could log in. I could go to class at my daughter's class, right? So I could just start lobbing comments at the teacher and so forth. That's not, you can't run a school like that,
Yeah. Even what you
comment from the peanut gallery.
I know. Even what you said about sports and the whole jump ball thing.
I'd have quite a bit to say. Some of those. It has been, one of the good things about it though is like you get you hear what the teachers are saying. I've really learned like what they are teaching and so forth, and it's like, because I ask my kids, because there's we people on the right, it's like, okay, they're indoctrinating our kids, and it's a big concern on the right that the liberal faculties and so forth are getting to them. The response is you can't back out of school. You have to go to school, right? You have to debrief. You have to, hey, what did they talk about? What were the points they made? And talk to them about it every day, right? So this does help in terms of you get to see every day what they're talking about. You get to hear those teachers giving the lessons, and it's instructive. It's kind of eye-opening. So, that's one sort of benefit out of all this.
Right. No, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I was talking to a prospective intern for Accuracy Academia yesterday, and he he actually attends school, St. Thomas College, University up in Minnesota. So it's a Catholic school. But we were talking about he has, I think, an aunt that's an educator and a parent or grandparent or somebody that's an educator. But I'm saying that maybe one of the silver linings about all of this is that, we have preached as conservatives all the time is that you need to be involved in your children's education. You can't just turn the kids over to the public school system and think that it's going to be okay, that you have to figure out, you have to kind of stay on top and see what they're being taught, because the indoctrination, is coming at a younger and younger ages. It was more focused on the college kids at one point in time, but it's really has gone into that K through 12 arena. So having the online learning, if there is a plus to this, is that parents that are around, that are working from home, if they are just dropping in occasionally to see how their kids are doing, they can hear what the teachers are saying. You would hope that would actually maybe be able to get the parents to do that debrief, or as a way to go back and say, wait a minute, and maybe go back to the school and the school system and say, what are you guys teaching? It's like, how long have you been teaching this stuff? What are you, why is this all this one-sided nonsense or whatever? Where are the facts? That type of stuff.
Right.
All right. We'll get to the bigger part of this now, which is the election. So we've been talking about this for weeks. Here we are, December 2nd, and we're almost, well, I mean, so what is it? It's 29 days. Is that official? 29 days since the election, I guess. So
we're not any closer to solving it than we were last week or the week before.
Yeah,
maybe farther from solving it.
Yeah, so I mean, you and I are not in complete agreement as to where we are with this in terms of, I'm more of the guy who's saying, like, it's time to go forward, and we're running out of time, mainly because we're running out of time to do this. But the Trump people are fighting, and I have always said that you count every vote and make sure it's all done fairly, and all of those things. But it is getting down here. We've got 12 days before the Electoral College. Trump's legal team, for the most part, their legal challenges have not gone very well.
So on that, a lot of the legal challenges that have not gone very well were not from Trump's team. All kind of people got out and mounted legal challenges, and a lot of what's been thrown out has been those challenges. So the hot ones you have now are Pennsylvania is going to go to the Supreme Court. They have to explain, among other things, why they mailed out 1.8 million mail-in ballots and got back 2.5 million. And they have to explain how the state Supreme Court on its own changed law. They can rule laws are unconstitutional, but they cannot say, okay, so now the law will be, right? Which they did in that case, which would affect all the post-November 3 votes that came in, which is easily enough to turn over the election. In Wisconsin, they have 150,000 ballots that are mail-in ballots that they cannot produce the envelopes for. So, what was it mailed in? If it was a mail-in ballot, where's the envelope? So, there's a court challenge coming on that likely is deemed likely to succeed. The court challenge in Pennsylvania is deemed likely to succeed. In Nevada, I believe it is tomorrow that we start questioning witnesses under oath. They've allowed full discovery of that. In Georgia, there's a new lawsuit coming today that addresses the fact that the mail-in ballots and ballots that were marked only for Biden appear to be machine marked. And there is a wealth of evidence from various statistical people saying that things happened that could not happen. For instance, in Georgia, it looks like what happened is they caught Biden up with a big raft of 400,000 to 2 drops, right? And once he was ahead, then every drop after that was Biden 50.5, Trump 49.4, right? Every single one had the same breakdown. So, I mean, nothing suspicious there. There's just a huge amount of testimony, people seeing trucks come in and delivering ballots in the middle of the night. About half the country is convinced the election was fraudulently won. About 35% of Democrats say that, including about 20% who say it is very likely that the Biden's victory is illegitimate. So, and those polls are moving in Trump's direction. You would think by now the people would be like you're saying, and say, okay, well, we're getting close to time here. Either big bombshell that changes everything, or we need to start making ready for the next president. But that's not what's happening. What's happening in the polls is that people are becoming more aware. There's getting to be so much fraud, so much evidence, so many of these witnesses, so much of the statistical data that it cannot be denied. So you're now, for weeks, like the Washington Post reported nothing about any of this, right? They just treated it like it wasn't even happening. If they said anything about it, like Trump is not conceded because of his unfounded allegations. And then they just moved on. There's 6 stories and 2 editorials in the A section of the Post today about various aspects of this. So they've gotten their attention and they realize it's a threat. CNN had a long piece yesterday, with a girl purporting to debunk all the theories of how the thing could be stolen. And she doesn't really debunk. It ended up being a bunch of quotes Trump said 2 years ago about various things. So when you look at the evidence of the people trying to debunk this, it's not very strong. So, I don't know that we're closer to the beginning than we are to the end, but I don't think we're all that close to the end.
Well, I mean, when we meet again, in a week's time, we'll be down to 5 days. I mean, I just see that at least for the Democrats,
we'll be down to what?
We'll be down to 5 days before the Electoral College votes. I mean, we're at 12 days.
Right, but you have the possibility of states not certifying their electors, not saying how they should vote. You have the possibility of at least 3 states saying, we can't tell, we're seating multiple electors, right? So, I mean, then you get into 12th Amendment, you get into, the House of Representatives voting 1 vote per state, right? And Trump wins that because 26 of them are controlled by Republicans, and only 23 are controlled by Democrats. One is shared.
Yeah, I just have a hard time thinking that the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court is really going to wade into this too deeply at this point in time. But I mean, more surprises have occurred in my lifetime. So who really knows? But for the Democrats, I think it's just as the clock ticks, it just continues to favor them in general over this. Polls are fine. I mean, we've talked about polls of all kinds, throughout the years, but polls are not. They're not facts. And in terms of President Trump has done an amazing job of setting the stage and convincing people about the potential for fraud, about this election and all these other things, much to the consternation of the media, I would say that, they can't kill this thing at all. It continues to be out there. But, I mean, what do you say about the charges from the media and from the liberals, and that's how I want to kind of couch this, about Trump's not really telling supporters about don't not inciting violence or whatever. Is that fake news to that degree?
That's fake news.
We got
some guy,
a lot of stuff going on.
Got his feelings hurt. It's like, hey, don't suborn cheating in your state, and you won't have to worry about that. That guy, they did some dirty stuff in Georgia, and the people involved in the government are responsible, right? And he's one of them. So, I don't really have a lot of sympathy for him. No one's burned down anything or shot anybody. It's like, words are tough, buddy, but you can't handle it. Put somebody in there who can.
I mean, with like with Governor Kemp, I mean, with all of this stuff that's gone on in Georgia, I mean, how does his reputation survive after all of this? I mean, even if it turns out in the end that Georgia certification stands for Biden, all this kind of stuff moves forward, when it comes time for him to run for re-election, do the Republicans support this guy?
No shot.
Yeah.
I think these guys that are reading this all wrong. I think that he has no shot. I think this is the last term of his political career in Georgia.
Yeah, but then it opens up that
he's
whole
won
thing.
This one, they can't take it away. but Republicans are not going to back. I mean, they're having a hard time talking Republicans into voting for these two Republican Senate candidates in Georgia, right? And it's getting harder. Like one of the things we were in Georgia Saturday night, and we were in a B-dubs watching football, right? And so there's multiple screens on all, and I got to tell you, Warnock is laying down ads. I mean, almost every ad was him, and it presents him in all kinds of weird and interesting ways. So, you know, they're spending some money on this. Ossoff had some ads on too. I saw one Loeffler ad, nothing about Purdue whatsoever in the 4 hours we sat there, you know, but Warnock slamming TV ads. You know, I don't know how, what impression that makes anymore. Obviously, he has a lot of explaining to do, and he's in the worst shape of any of the four candidates, polling wise and reputation wise and so forth. But, you know, he's trying to change the reputation, you know, and you know, that raft of TV ads, that's how you do it.
So, I mean, in your opinion, though, I mean, one of the attack points on the Senate candidates, Republicans, has been, you know, selling stock, you know, at a high price, you know, things that they knew about.
Right. One of his ads just goes through the stock selling thing. You know, she's smart. She gets up and says, you know, it's program trading. You know, all you guys have program trading in your 401s, 401ks or whatever, right? I mean, that's why that happened. That's why and how that happened. And it's what she said the first time. And she said, you know, the ethics committee looked at it and said, there's nothing here. You know, you have to go fight those attacks. I think that's one thing that, you know, Republicans have fallen down on in the last two cycles is people attack them. You know, people attack, you know, why did Trump, for instance, never clean up the very fine people hoax, right? Biden said that throughout the campaign. Kamala said it throughout the campaign. You know, he said there was very fine people, those Nazis in Charlottesville. No, he didn't. He completely excluded them, right? It was like, why didn't you show that? I saw an ad for it, but it wasn't from their campaign. It was from some PAC, right? But I mean, you got to make that point. This guy's lying. You know, here's what really happened. You know, and they let the lie stand. And so if you let them stand, then people believe them.
I don't know if I didn't look into this, and I meant to look into this in terms of what the rules are. I mean, you had worked on the Hill at one point in time for senators, congressmen, things like this in terms of those assets that they hold like that. Are they? I thought at least maybe with the president, you know, they put him into a blind trust or something like that, and they have kind of an arm's length thing, so you know, there's no influence there. Does that same case hold true as far as you know for senators and congressmen, that in essence that to avoid any influence peddling or anything like this, that they really don't actively manage their funds, their stocks and their bonds and things like that, that you know that's kind of there's a wall there for them? Do you know?
Those are they're not required to do that. People do that to show that they are, you know, trying to do stuff right. But like Trump didn't put his stuff in a blind trust. I mean, he's running a multi-billion-dollar corporation. He can't just say, "Oh, we'll come back in 5 years and see where this stands." Right? It has to be managed. His sons managed it. There's not a lot of evidence that Trump was deeply involved in much of all that went on there during his time as president. But I mean, that had to get managed. In the case of Loeffler, her husband is CEO of the company that owns the New York Stock Exchange. And so, you know, whoever did that trading probably didn't even know about what she had heard about coronavirus. So, you know, I mean, I think in the end, it became pretty obvious she was a victim of this too. You know, but you got to go fight the charge. You got to point that out.
Right. I mean, what do you think?
Warnock is definitely making a huge deal out of it in his ads.
Yeah, but I just don't know whether or not that kind of a thing is a big enough campaign issue to make it stick, to say that's an issue that people are going to be voting on. I think now it's, you know, the focus is on it. You know, obviously the control of the Senate is at stake here, you know, with these races. And, you know, and there's still economic issues and the coronavirus and other things that affect people more than, you know, a large portfolio.
She should have a huge, because I mean, the way that went is, she was, her and Doug Collins were fairly close. And then it was a long way back to Warnock. And so, uh, you know, her and she beat Doug Collins. And then, the combined votes of them was almost 2-1 over Warnock.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
know
he's got
that.
a big uphill battle to climb. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I think when I saw it, and I didn't look at the last results, I mean, if you took Collins and Loeffler together, it wasn't going to be enough to hit the 50% threshold, but there was a comfortably ahead. So if the Collins
Yeah,
people,
like 25 points ahead.
right, if the Collins people can join with the Loeffler people, and they roughly, and they get that kind of thing, then I think, based on the fact that there's 2 candidates and not like 19,
Right.
Loeffler's in, she's in far better, she's in good shape. The Purdue Ossoff thing.
And Collins endorsed her and urged all his people to vote for her and all that. So
yeah,
that should be sewed up. He did the right thing.
Yeah. So, what do you think about, this thought just occurred to me when we're talking about Kemp, though. I mean, what do you think about Doug Collins running for governor down the line?
Doug Collins has a bright political future. Most of the stuff he does right. I was kind of surprised he lost to her, but I think people kind of liked it. A, it's a woman, and B, to keep the person there who was there. Incumbent advantage. But to me, she's a little bit safer than Purdue, but Purdue's 3 or 4 points ahead. So, and I figure if you remove the fraud from Georgia, it's a red state. So I'm actually kind of confident about that, as long as we don't get into big arguments about, whether we should punish the Republicans for not sufficiently backing Trump and so forth. So,
right.
I think the thing to do is to keep your head and get these guys elected.
Yeah, that's the. So I'm going to go to an aside here in terms of this, because you're talking about the Republicans, and yeah. So, I live in Montgomery County, Maryland, as you well know, and there's 2 things that are happening, back to back. The state party hierarchy, they're having their elections for their officers coming up in, I think, about 10 days or whatever it is, in a couple of weekends. So the state chairman is running for re-election for another 2-year term, and he's got 2 other people who were actually his first vice chair and his second vice chair. Everybody's elected separately, so they weren't really a slate per se, and they're running against him. So there's 3 guys running for the state chair, and there's other competition for the other positions in the state party. And then on Montgomery County level, we always have our elections annually. So for some reason, it got pushed to January, and it used to be November, and then it became December, and now it's January. But there's also some competition going on there. But what I've seen on both levels is a lot of nastiness and a lot of vitriol, a lot of just stuff being thrown at the other candidates. I mean, there's a lot, and I'm like, this is, to me, one of the things about Republicans, why they fail to succeed in an area like Maryland on a long-term basis, is because they can't help but fight amongst themselves. They're tearing each other down. They're fighting over these state party leadership positions, which they'll hold for a couple of years. But you do this, you take a lot of energy, you spend a lot of energy fighting on these levels, these local levels and these state levels, and then it's all the time that takes away time from saying, okay, of what's our plan for 2022 for the governor's race in Maryland and stuff like this, and your people are going to be left with a bad.
You should run a Republican.
Yeah, right.
You should put a Republican up for governor. Just any of them.
Well, that's part of the big discussion in Maryland, is just that, what do they do in 2022? Because the lieutenant governor is a nice guy, but he's a nice guy. He's not a dynamic guy. What he's got, he'll get people to support him if he decides to run for governor, which I expect that he will. But he's such a low key guy. There's no energy there. There are other people that would potentially earn, but they don't have statewide recognition right now. I mean, I don't know. I'm a little bit, Democrats, to me, I mean, all they have to do is throw somebody up, and they could probably win. They could probably win this race in 2022 at this stage. Which would be,
because Republicans, and it's all this is amplified in Maryland because of the situation. But the argument is always between saying what we know to be right and saying what we think will get us elected, right? And so, I mean, the Democrats deal with that to some extent, and that's why they have to muzzle AOC and those people from time to time. But I mean, it's a constant issue for us because, if you're Larry Hogan, you're saying, hey, you guys, if you're going to be, true conservatives, you're not going to win. I won, being a liberal, and so you got to think about your liberal state kind of got to look like that, versus people who say, why not offer a real choice, and it's a tougher sell, right? So you got to go into Baltimore and you got to get some votes. You can't get shut out there. You can't get shut out in Montgomery County. You got to come up with something. And so, you end up in that battle all the time in Maryland over trying to, and then, like in Virginia, there was about 10 or 15 years, and it has only barely ended, that, the thought was that the way to get Republicans to vote for you was to embrace the old past of, the Confederacy and, Corey Stewart, and, I mean, we made some terrible mistakes in Virginia in who to run in some of these races. And because, they thought, okay, people want total extremism here. And it's like, no. And the option to that is not, a milquetoast Larry Hogan type. The option is to be for, low taxes, low regulation, promoting business, right? With things that governors in modern states do now, organizing the health thing so it doesn't cost us as much and so forth. That's out there. That place in the political landscape is unclaimed in Virginia. And if you could get a candidate who would claim it, I believe you'd have a lot of potential there because, Virginia's got more military than any state in the union. It has, the the south side of the state, solidly Republican. The battle is in the crescent, right? From DC down to Richmond and over to the beach. And you got to get something, better than a 90-10 loss out of that. I think Biden got 73% of the votes in Fairfax County, which is 1/7 of the state. So population wise, so you can't, you have to hold that down somehow. And I don't think it's by, pretending to be something you're not.
Right. But I will say for Larry Hogan, I mean, I don't see any presidential hopes, possibilities with him, but I do see
who would elect him,
right?
But the Democrats and not the Republicans. And who does that leave?
But I see that he could possibly run for Senate in Maryland and make a go of it because of his track record. The way he's been is that, I mean, Democrats would vote for him. Democrats have voted for him. If he goes up against someone who's, not as entrenched or maybe too entrenched, he might be able to find a path.
Who is next up? Is it Cardin or Chris?
I don't know. I'd have to look. I have to look it up and see. But I do want to ask.
Fairly milquetoast guys, beatable guys, both of them.
Right, exactly. In Maryland, they really are. Hogan, he's campaigned well. He's done real well, and I can't argue with that. And by the fact that he made sure that he had no association really with Trump, was a big plus for him in Maryland. It didn't sit well with a lot of Republicans, but for him to run, to win re-election, that was a part of his campaign. I mean, that they couldn't, the Democrats couldn't tie him to Trump because he had out publicly denounced Trump on many occasions, so that worked for him. I do want to ask you now about we've been talking about all this voter stuff about Bill Barr and what he said about the DOJ and everything like that. That definitely lit a fire under a lot of conservatives. Rudy Giuliani and I think Lou Dobbs and a bunch of other people were not happy.
Well, Bill Barr, but we didn't see him for weeks, and then yesterday made quite a splash, right? A couple of things here. So one thing is he said that back in October he appointed John Durham a special counsel. And the broadcast reason for that is because it will make it harder for Biden to end the investigation should he take over. right? Because it's a special counsel, you're waiting on it. It also means that, they had said, Durham is not writing a report. He is coming up with indictments, right? He's pursuing criminal activity and trying to expose criminals and put them in jail, right? So now if you're a special counsel, then there probably is a report involved, which you can kind of say, lay of the land, here's the things that we did conclusively prove. Here's the things we proved that there's not really a good, criminal to put it on. And here's the things that we came close to proving but didn't. So you get a wider variety of what they've done with all this. But I mean, none of those guys are going to jail. I think we all know that. Comey, Brennan, all of them, they waited too long. We needed this information to vote, right? They failed America. John Durham failed America. Bill Barr failed America by not bringing this to a conclusion. We needed to know, did they mess with the 2016 election before we had the 2020 election? And the failure to accomplish that in 4 years is incomprehensible to me. Others say that this was done because as special counsel, Durham has jurisdiction over what can be declassified, and they're trying to stop Trump from declassifying stuff that they don't want declassified. I think Trump's power exceeds anything about special counsel. There's also talk that this is an illegal special counsel appointment, and that, based on that, Biden can get rid of it anyway. I don't, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the case of that, but I suspect that this will not see the light of day if Biden emerges as president.
So what about Barr's, saying that they couldn't see enough evidence, about on the voter fraud that would make a difference in the election, basically.
They're not looking for evidence. They're not investigating voter fraud. To the extent the federal government is investigating at all, it is DHS. It's not DOJ. And what he said, the full thing that he said is that, going through me is too slow, right? We have to take our time and do all this stuff. You need a faster remedy. And that's why this is in civil court and not criminal court. And if they come up with stuff that we need to look at, then we will take it over and look at it, right? So, to me, like right now, to me, the priority is all on proving the fraud and getting these states to overturn their results, right? Right now, who goes to jail is a tertiary concern. I know a lot of conservatives are like, oh, we got to jail this guy, that guy. You got to get those 4 states to overturn, right? I think, Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. I think Arizona, there was an interesting hearing, and there was a lot of stuff in there about, vote totals that it was mathematically impossible to do and so forth. But I don't think they can get there in Arizona. I never have thought they could get there in Arizona. But these other states are far more promising and would take Biden well below 270. And so you would go to these other remedies to pick. So, they have not looked, and he was candid about that they're not really investigating it. So the idea that they didn't find it should not be controversial. All
right. We're nearing the end of the show. 2-minute time.
Wow. Let me look at my list here, because there was all kinds of stuff. You had on here the thing about the pardons. So there's he pardoned Mike Flynn. Flynn was under a gag order. I don't know that the judge has accepted the pardon. I don't know that the judge can stop the pardon, but the judge just seems unwilling to let go.
Is it the same? Does it go before Emmett Sullivan?
Yeah. Okay. He still controls the case.
Okay.
So, but if there's a presidential pardon, I think that trumps all that. But I'm not a lawyer, so others can weigh in or whatever. There's a story out now that Rudy has said, "Would you please pardon me?" And Trump's thinking about pardoning his kids. And people are like, "From what? What did they do that needs a pardon?" Which is an interesting question. But I think that what's far more interesting is there's been no serious allegations against Kushner or Ivanka, but what there has been is numerous threats by various Democrats to use the law to persecute people with opposing political views. And I don't blame them for wanting some protection from that, right? The threats are, members of Congress, including AOC, have made these threats. It's not just, randos in the street. So, to me, that is something that needs to be looked at. Is like, where does all this stand, and what does, how far will the Democrats go to, prosecute thought crimes in essence?
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I'm not a lawyer either, obviously, and I haven't looked deeply into this, but on the surface, my question is also kind of like, so you issue a pardon, but what are you pardoning them for exactly? Does not that raise more red flags? If
right, I think you.
Don't you
I
have to
don't
have
know
a
that you
reason?
can just say blanket pardon. Ivanka, turns out she shot 8 people, but she's off the hook.
Yeah, I don't think that's the right way to go on this.
Right.
Anyway, so my final thing would just be, is this the sports world, and and how they're handling this, particularly with the NFL. I work part-time with a guy who lives in in the Denver area, so he's a big Broncos fan, and he and his fiance were just besides themselves about this whole situation with losing all their quarterbacks, and I don't know. I mean, the NFL, okay, at least, my point here at least would be, it's like, look, you cannot leave a team without a real quarterback. Okay, I don't, this was just ridiculous. And their complaint, as fans, were just like, okay, so why does the Steelers-Ravens game keep getting postponed and rescheduled? And then we got to play with this, we got to play with a guy from the practice squad who hasn't played quarterback since college, and their summation was, it's Lamar, they don't, there's a little politicking going on with the NFL and Roger Goodell as to who's protecting, who he's not protecting.
Right. I definitely think that there's some truth to that. Also, bizarre column in the Post this morning by Sally Jenkins. Basically these athletes are all despicable animals for, not wearing masks in their sleep and so forth. It's, I mean, the thing about it is, like, there's no end to the overreaction. So, but it looks like basketball's starting up and it looks pretty safe so far. So hopefully we're nearing the end on that.
Yeah, and college basketball, Duke went down. So,
yeah, that's right.
I'm not sad about that.
I want to teach my teams to rebound like Michigan State rebounds. Oh my gosh! Every time there's a shot, three shirts ganged up at the goal.
And that's the thing too. It's like I just, in finishing, my thing too, it goes back to what you were saying about the no jump ball thing. It's like, I don't understand why you can't have a jump ball. I mean, if people are having to rebound and get and all these things, like how much more of a risk is a jump ball, than going for fighting for a rebound? I don't understand.
To tell you what, I am happy that they are attempting to try. Yeah. And if they're going to do that, like, whatever rules
small price to pay.
Yeah. Just whatever, make it happen.
All right. Well, we're at the end. We've nosed around enough here and bantered around. All right, everyone, thank you once again for joining us. Please, as always, stay safe, stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America. We will see you again next week. And who knows, maybe we'll be a step closer to knowing who really is the president, right, Brian?
That's right.
All right.